Taiwan Health Minister says Singapore is likely to be the next country it forms a travel bubble with.
The Central Narcotics Bureau has seized 20.5 kilos of cannabis, the largest haul of the drug in 14 years.
And MCCY says it's puzzled by an Indian composer's claims over one of Singapore's catchiest National Day songs.
Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
I'm Harianto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. 15 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed today, all imported. They were placed on stay-home notices when they arrived in Singapore. Now more details will be released tonight.
A day after confirming the launch of a travel bubble with Palau, Taiwan said next on the list would likely be Singapore. Taiwan's health minister said today that discussions have begun between the two countries.
Last December, Singapore announced the unilateral lifting of restrictions for travellers entering from Taiwan. Now this means they're exempted from the 2-week mandatory quarantine and are only required to take a COVID-19 test upon arrival.
Meanwhile, Taiwan's transportation minister noted that while Japan, South Korea and Vietnam are all discussing the possibilities of travel bubbles with Taiwan, he said, quote, Singapore is by far the most proactive, but he declined to reveal more as details are still being negotiated.
Cargo drivers from Malaysia who have taken both doses of the COVID-19 vaccine in Singapore will receive a certificate. They'll also be exempted from daily on-arrival tests 14 days after the second dose. This also applies to workers accompanying them. The Trade and Industry Ministry said that those who haven't been vaccinated in Singapore can still enter, subject to border health measures, including on-arrival tests.
Well, in non-COVID-19 news, the Central Narcotics Bureau has seized about 20.5 kilograms of cannabis in a drug bust, the largest haul of the drug in 14 years. Officers confiscated other drugs as well during the 2-day crackdown, including heroin and ecstasy, and the total amount of drugs seized is worth around $1.7 million. 3 Singaporean men between 27 and 33 years old were arrested for suspected drug-related offences. Offenders found illegally trafficking more than 500 grams of cannabis could face the death penalty.
Sound familiar? Well, this is actually We Can Achieve, a song written by a composer in India. And it sounds very much like our National Day classic, Count on Me Singapore. The catchy NDP song is in a copyright tussle because of the similarities with We Can Achieve. Indian composer Joseph Mendoza has been accused of copying the 1986 song, but he's claiming he wrote his version in 1983. He also said that he found out about Count on Me Singapore only a few days ago. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth has refuted these claims. In a Facebook post, MCCY said that it has contacted Mr. Mendoza, inviting him to substantiate his claims.
In a statement today, the substation board invited proposals to save the venue, but it will still be winding up its operations and handing over the premises to the National Arts Council. Its statement is a response to a virtual town hall meeting on March the 6th, which was attended by almost 300 members of the arts community. You will have until April the 20th to submit your suggestions to the substation.
In his commentary yesterday, the Straits Times' senior transport correspondent Christopher Tan called for authorities to send a stronger signal to errant builders and contractors involved in our transport infrastructure in order to avoid future preventable lapses.
This, as Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung revealed the 2 causes of the massive rail breakdown last October. That incident left more than 6,700 passengers stranded on trains across 3 MRT lines for up to 3 hours and affected about 123,000 commuters directly.
First, Mr. Ong said there was either an inherent manufacturing defect in the power cables supplied by French company Alstom, or there was mishandling during installation. Either way, it led to a cut in cable insulation, which resulted in a short circuit.
The second cause, circuit breakers, which would have isolated the cable fault, failed because components had rusted. The rust obstructed movement of parts and prevented the circuit breakers from tripping. Alstom will pay for the replacement of trip coils and the power cables along the Tuas West extension of the East-West MRT line.
Christopher also detailed several examples of train disruptions that were all linked to relatively new components. In 2015, a newly replaced circuit breaker caught fire on the Bukit Panjang LRT, causing the line to shut down for more than 24 hours.
In 2012, when the Circle Line was just around 3 years old, 120 kilometers of its power cables were replaced with more water-resistant cables at a cost of $15 million. This as spans of the cables are often submerged in tunnel water.
And back in 2006, a power fault caused the 7-hour breakdown of the North-East line, which was traced to faulty insulation. Investigators narrowed the cause to the quality of a ceramic insulator.
Well, Christopher is here to take this discussion further. Chris, as I'm reading about these, recent train disruptions, I'm wondering whether are our disruptions to our rail system occurring more often than they ought to?
Okay, I think if you look at all disruptions in total, numbers have been coming down. Now, on the whole, we are having one disruption or one delay of more than 5 minutes for every 1 million train kilometers traveled. That's quite a feat. That ranks up above quite a lot of other metros in the world. And it's pretty much the gold standard, I think. But the major glitches, the major disruptions that actually cause the most inconvenience are still quite disturbingly numerous in numbers. And the ones that are linked to new or newish equipment that shouldn't have happened in the first place are happening. So those are the ones that are actually worrying, and those are the ones that shouldn't have happened in the first place. Sorry. Now, if we look at the numbers themselves, from 2020 back to 2006, we've had 5 of such major incidents that are linked to new equipment, and that averages once every 2.8 years. I think that is quite a high frequency for glitches that are linked to new equipment. In the first place, new equipment should not break down. And we are not talking about systems that are going through teething issues. Whenever a new system is set up, a new line is set up, there are bound to be some teething issues in the first couple of months. These are linked to equipment that are very robust to begin with. And in this last October incident, it was linked to power cables. Now, these are very thick cables. Even in our houses, in our homes, cables that we install in our homes, buried behind walls, we don't think about them again when they are installed. And whenever something goes wrong, our circuit breaker will trip, and then we find where the fault is. Usually it's linked to a component rather than the cables themselves. In October, on that fateful night, the cable burned through. The insulation was compromised, and there was a short circuit. Unfortunately, the circuit breakers along that stretch did not work because components in them had rusted through. Now, this kind of thing, it's really, I think it's a worry if we look at how we are spending billions on our MRT systems, and then we have new things breaking down. I think if assets are old and maybe maintenance regime has been neglected or lagging in some way, that's partly excusable, not totally excusable. But when new things break down, I think we have to question deeper.
Christopher, you ended your commentary by saying, quote, Singapore must send a stronger signal to errant builders and contractors if they are found to be solely responsible for failures. So how should these parties be appropriately penalized?
I think if you take a cue from the 2015 July 7th breakdown, where SMRT was fined $5.4 million, a record figure, we can kind of gauge where the quantum could be for this October breakdown. Of course, the 2015 one was slightly larger, affected more people, but I think to the scale of, number of lines affected and, how it affected the rest of the public transport system, $5.4 million thereabouts. But bear in mind that after the $5.4 million penalty, we had actually raised the penalty framework. Now, operators can be fined up to 10% of their annual revenue. Now, if that ruling had been in place for the 2015 breakdown, SMRT would have been fined up to $50 million. Now, that kind of figure would be, I think, a suitable deterrent. We can work around there. I think for contractors, they don't have an annual steady revenue. They have, over a 10-year period, look at their average earnings here, revenue here, and maybe work out a sum there.
Well, Christopher, how about last October's incident then? How would you assess what would be a fair penalty for the responsible party?
I think if you look in the past, where there were major breakdowns that are attributed to contractors or suppliers, the penalties have been as severe as bans from government tenders for 5 years, and on top of that, fines. Now, I think it's up to the authorities to assess in this instance whether, Alstom, which was responsible for the cable fault, and which was also responsible for the 2012 Circle Line recabling incident, where 120 kilometers of cables had to be replaced when the line was barely 3 years old. We have to look at that, and they have to look at that and assess whether a heftier signal or stronger signal needs to be sent. A fine, a ban, these are possibilities, but just allowing them to kind of get away with just replacing the assets, I don't think it's deterrent enough. I mean, looking at the repeated number of cases where new equipment give way, right? Obviously, it's not a clear, strong signal that, when things happen, the most they do or the most they have to do is to replace. And I'm sure these people or these companies would have insurance for that.
Well, great points there, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've been speaking with Christopher Tan, Senior Transport Correspondent at the Straits Times. The link to his commentary is in the description below if you're watching us on YouTube.
Taking a quick look overseas, Myanmar's ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi is facing more charges as the military attempts to keep her behind bars. The junta charged her with violating an anti-corruption law which carries a maximum of 15 years in prison. This is on top of 4 other charges the regime had previously filed. Ms. Suu Kyi has been prevented from meeting her legal team, which has denied wrongdoing and views all the charges as political.
Tokyo will see its state of emergency order lifted on March 21st as scheduled. The move comes as its COVID-19 infection and hospitalization numbers are declining since they peaked in January. Opening hours for eateries in 4 prefectures, including Tokyo, will be extended by an hour until 9 p.m.
But as countries around the world ease restrictions and ramp up vaccination campaigns, Brazil recorded more than 90,000 COVID-19 cases for the first time. It's a second straight day of record numbers, taking the toll to about 11.7 million cases.
France recorded its highest daily number of cases in nearly 4 months, with the hard-hit Paris region bracing for possible weekend lockdown. In the past 24 hours, over 38,000 new infections were reported. The country is currently trying to ramp up its vaccination campaign despite the temporary suspension of the AstraZeneca jab.
Saturdays are for our weekly check-in with our colleagues at Life on what we can do over the weekends. The first pick is an upcoming book that's 6 years in the making. It's called Secret Singapore. That'll be on our shelves next month.
Well, since we can't go overseas and we're always on the hunt for something new on our tiny island, this book's release is pretty good because Secret Singapore uncovers 130 under-the-radar spots here.
Well, our intrepid travel correspondent Clara Locke is here to share all about it. Clara, in going through this book, were there any spots that were particularly exciting for you that, made you want to immediately go out and make a trip and check them out?
Yeah, so I think this book made me really curious about the North. And in Singapore, the North gets a bad rap, right? Because people say, oh, Yishun is weird, or they don't really know what there is to do there. But the authors highlighted a few interesting spots. For instance, Woodlands Waterfront Park, which they say is one of the best sunset spots in Singapore. So that made me really curious because prior to the pandemic, I used to cover travel, right? So I used to see all these glorious sunsets in different countries. And it occurred to me that I've never actually sat down and intentionally watched the sunset in Singapore. So I would love to check that out, see if it lives up to the hype. And then also maybe put together a few spots in the North for a half-day or a full-day itinerary. And some other interesting places I think would be Kampong Admiralty, which is this lush retirement village with communal farms and just in a very nice green setting. And I would maybe also check out Sembawang Hot Springs, which have been refurbished a few years ago. So people bring eggs and then they cook them in the hot spring water, and then they bring buckets so they can just sit there and soak their feet and chill. And then I would maybe also check out Bewley House, which is this neoclassical building, and it used to house officers from the British Royal Navy. Today it's got a Chinese restaurant there, and then outside the building there's this nice stretch of supposedly very quiet, pristine beach, and it's supposed to make you feel like you're not in Singapore, which is really what everyone is looking for these days, right?
Now, Clara, as we mentioned earlier, 6 years went into this book. What were the authors trying to achieve with Secret Singapore other than showing readers these hidden gems of Singapore?
I think they're trying to capture the Singapore that is here today before it is lost. So one of the authors, Jerome Lim, is actually the guy behind The Long and Winding Road, which is this heritage blog that has been around for years, and it documents all these spots in Singapore, that some of which have been demolished, and it's got all these historical facts about all these places. And he was inspired to start the blog on a work trip in Penang in 2008, where he said that the things he was seeing around him in Penang reminded him so much of his childhood growing up in the 1960s in Singapore. And he described to me all these scenes like the coastline in Bedok and Tanah Merah that he used to visit his dad, which no longer exists due to land reclamation. And then there are villages that are no longer around, department stores that he used to visit with his mum that have also been gone. And he described the Singapore River back then when it was still filthy and you could still see labourers unloading things from boats. And all this is a Singapore that doesn't exist today. So he started the blog to capture whatever's around us, and so the book became a natural extension of that. And in the book, he also captures aspects of our heritage, preservation and conversation, where civil society has become more vocal over the years, speaking up for places that they care about. So, for example, one of the places in the book is a pair of pillars from the old National Library that have been preserved at Singapore Management University. And that was, according to Jerome, one of the first instances where people in Singapore came up in support of a building that they didn't want to see get torn down because they felt like it was such an important community area and was so unique to them and to being Singaporean. And so I think through the book, the authors want to get more people talking about heritage and I guess open their eyes to the heritage in buildings and in places around us, because that's what becomes part of our identity as Singaporeans and is what is going to make us proud and unique of the country in the future.
Well said. Well, that was Clara Locke, travel correspondent for the Straits Times. Secret Singapore is out next month.
That's right. Now, Olivia, we covered the Oscar nominations a few days back, right, when they made an announcement for the nominations. Any particular movies stood out for you?
Yes, Nomadland in particular really stood out for me. I saw the trailer. It was really riveting. And I do like Frances McDormand a lot. So another one is, of course, Minari, which is, I believe, has been in our theatres since March the 11th. But I haven't found time to catch it yet. So, you know, it's, of course, the story of a Korean family settling down in 1980s Arkansas. And it's up for 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. And, of course, film correspondent John Louis is here with his take on this one. So, John, you have seen Minari and have actually reviewed it already. So, in your review, you wrote that, quote, movies about the Asian American experience have predictable beats. How does Minari avoid these tropes?
Yeah, I think you all know what I'm talking about. You watch an Asian American film, everybody has to gather around the table and 吃吃吃 or 家家家 kind of thing. And that is the shorthand for saying family togetherness or when a lot of family drama happens. Well, this one is a bit different. Lee Isaac Chung, the filmmaker, looks for small moments that say they are Korean. They are Korean and also Korean in a very strange place called Arkansas in America.
Okay. And John, you gave it 4 stars. Now, what accounted for the last missing star?
Well, I love the film. I don't want people to think that 4 stars means that it's a bad film. No, it means that I think the last star perhaps was missing because it's not a big scale film. Sometimes movies just hit all the emotional spots, all the brain spots and all the heart spots, but also it's big, it's grand, it's a visual feast. This one is not. It's a very small, intimate family drama.
Right, I see. Well, the film has already won Best Foreign Film at the Golden Globes as well as the Critics' Choice Awards. John, do you see it following in the footsteps of Parasite at the Oscars, which of course, you know, famously won Best Picture last year, or will Best Picture go to Nomadland, you think?
Yeah, Nomadland is a strong contender, and Nomadland, I gave it 3 stars. I thought Minari was better. Nomadland kind of was a little bit too soft and romantic about poverty for me. Minari should win, but I think Nomadland will win many awards.
Thanks, John. We've been speaking with John Louis, film correspondent for the Straits Times. Minari is already showing in cinemas here.
Yep, well, there's a new menu to look forward to as well. That's at the modern European restaurant Tablescape, which is at Grand Park City Hall. And food correspondent Eunice Quek joins us now to share more. So Eunice, this new menu, what's new about it from, you know, the previous iteration?
Well, you know, restaurants have to keep things fresh nowadays, so plenty of new dishes to look forward to. Interestingly enough, actually, the ones that caught my attention are the ones that highlight vegetables. And no, this is nothing to do with like plant-based meats, not about that. It's just fresh, seasonal vegetables that are presented and cooked really well.
Right. So I suppose apart from the vegetables, what other dishes would you recommend at from the new menu?
Well, of course, if you are, you know, a meat lover, straight up go for the Sanchoku Wagyu strip loin. Simply grilled, it's juicy, it's flavorful, and well, comes with a side of some charcoal grilled eggplant and some crisp tomatoes. But well, the ones that really stood out to me were, like I mentioned, the vegetable dishes. So you can check out this colorful botanic garden vegetable dish. It's not just a salad; it actually has a layer of this charcoal grilled eggplant. It's topped with, you know, a mix of raw and steamed vegetables that are in season, and dressed, you know, in a blend of olive oil, pommery mustard, raspberry vinaigrette. And what actually, you know, takes this dish to another level is the fact that it comes with, you know, a small glass of lapsang souchong tea. And so when you kind of drink a little bit of the tea, you have a bite of the vegetables, it kind of brings out the richness, smokiness of the vegetables, some of them that have been grilled. And there's also one more to look out for, which is the creamy zucchini soup. You have the summer squash done in 3 ways. So you get the cream, you get these sauteed cubes, so that kind of gives you a bit of a crunch as you are drinking the soup. And you also have the zucchini flour that's stuffed with ricotta, and usually you might have this fried, but in this case it is steamed. So really nice, delicate flavors. You get a really nice meal because some of these dishes are part of set menus. Won't make you too full, too uncomfortable. Good for if you have vegetarian friends as well.
Well, I've actually not looked forward to eating vegetables, but I think this time around, after Eunice's description, I am actually looking forward to it. Yeah.
Escape. That's where you can find it.
Well, thank you so much, Eunice. That was food correspondent Eunice Quek. There are more suggestions from our live colleagues in the Friday pages tomorrow.
For more news and videos, do visit straitstimes.com and of course subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Harian Tudiman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.